Contemplating yourself is what suicidal ideation was. And I'm dancing around this because I can see you're uncomfortable with my even going there.
I understand why you are, though. I wasn't expecting it, but I understand why you are.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the Behavioral Arts. My name is Spidey, and I use my degree in sociology and psychology, my certifications in criminal interrogation and body language analysis, and over 10 years' experience as an award-winning mentalist to teach people behavioral analysis and practical psychology on stages and television shows all over the world. In a recent interview with CBS, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle opened up about some personal struggles and their mission to fight cyberbullying of teens and children, which is a growing problem all over the world. Now, the public feedback of the interview was mixed. Some viewers supported their mission, while others called it self-serving, fake, and pointed out some really interesting body language moments. But what do their facial expressions, body language, and word choice actually reveal? And why did the way the message was being communicated rub some viewers the wrong way? Let's dive right in.
Our kids are young. They're 3 and 5. They're amazing. But all you want to do as parents is protect them. And so as we can see what's happening in the online space, we know that there's a lot of work to be done there, and we're just happy to be able to be a part of change for good.
That when your children ask for help, someone, is there to give it.
If you know how to help.
Thank you.
Meghan and Harry have long spoken out against online bullying and continue advocating for mental health awareness.
All right, so just in that first clip, there's a ton to talk about and a few moments that a lot of people online are talking about in terms of body language. So let's clear some stuff up. I want to start where I very often start my analysis, which is with the eyebrows. This is a body part that I pay a lot of attention to, and there's a lot of research out there, cross-cultural, that shows the importance of the eyebrows in nonverbal communication. So towards the beginning, as she says, all you want to do as parents is protect them, we see an eyebrow flash. This is where the eyebrows go up with protect them. And this is a very common eyebrow flash of emphasis. So we very often use the eyebrows to give importance to things, whether it's people, events, or words. This is important. And that's all we're seeing there. But I want you to pay attention to the fact that we are seeing both eyebrows fully go up. And this is going to be really, really important later on in the interview, so put a pin in it. The fact that both eyebrows went up. Another really interesting moment that teaches us the importance of context happened just before the eyebrow flash. It's as she was saying, all you want to do as parents, and at that exact moment, we saw a one-sided shoulder shrug. Her left shoulder shrugged as she was saying that. Now, if in that moment she had done it this way, if she said, all you want to do as parents is protect them, that would have been a full two-sided shrug. And there's a lot of research on shrugging. Sometimes it's the shoulders, sometimes the hands get involved, sometimes the eyebrows or the mouth. But it denotes a lack of something. And in this case, it would have simply meant a lack of capacity. All you want to do is protect them, but sometimes you can't. So I don't know how to protect them always. It would have made a ton of sense. However, in behavioral analysis, whenever we see a one-sided shoulder shrug, that gets our attention. Because normal shrugs, most of the time, are like this. You're not thinking about it, and it's symmetric. When it's one side, it's more deliberate. We're trying to convince you of something. It's more of an illustrator, which are the gestures that we use to emphasize things, and those can be asymmetric very often. Then I noticed she was also illustrating with just her left hand. She was talking with her left hand, and the right hand was nowhere in sight. But that's fine, because sometimes we just illustrate when we speak with one hand. But it was interesting how first it was just the shoulder, now it was also the left hand. I thought that was a little coincidental, but I got my answer when the camera zoomed out, and I saw that her right hand was on Prince Harry's knee. So that explains why we were seeing just the illustrators with one hand, and even the shrug with just one side. Because if that hand is relaxed over here, even if you go to do a two-sided shrug, the one side is going to move a lot more. So going back, it's likely that when she was talking about that sense of incapacity that a parent feels in protecting their child, what we saw was in fact a shrug of incapacity, which is a type of shrug that's talked about in the research, and we see when someone feels like something's out of their hands. I don't know what to do, I wish I can help, I can't do anything. So it's likely that that's what it was, but because her hand was on Prince Harry's knee, we saw it more on one side. Oh, and by the way, that's another important pin. Remember that from the beginning of the interview, from the very first answer, she's got her hand on Prince Harry's knee. That's going to be really important. Keep that in mind. Right in the beginning of the segment, in the first sentence, there's a really good example of why Meghan Markle divides audiences and why there's a big demographic of people out there who just get irritated by her when she's normally talking. It's in the way that she communicates. So she's talking about her children and she says, our children are young, 3 and 5, And then she pauses and her head is directed down here as she has this smile and she closes her eyes and she goes, "They're amazing," with this big smile and her head going side to side like this to suggest it's unbelievable how amazing they are. And then she goes on with her sentence.
3 and 5, they're amazing. But all you want to do as parents is protect them.
This method of communication by Meghan Markle is something we've talked about numerous times on the channel, and it was even featured. Those segments were featured in a bunch of news articles because as a performer, I know what it is. I know exactly what it is and why certain audiences react the way that they do. And essentially it's this over-dramatic style of communicating that we would expect to see in a Hallmark movie. So in this case, she's pausing to go, "They're amazing," while she talks about their kids, like this fairy tale life that she has with her amazing kids. And some people connect with that, right? When you have this dramatization and this emotion, and they might go, "Oh, how nice that she's taking a moment to acknowledge how amazing her kids are," and they connect with that style of storytelling. But to a large portion of the audience, this style of communication feels inauthentic, which is why a lot of people call her fake. It's because of moments like this. Because we know that in most normal interactions, we don't take pauses to reflect and smile upon how amazing our kids are. Now, to be clear, there's nothing inherently wrong with this. It's just the way some people communicate. And for some people, it's fine, but others have a hard time connecting with it because it doesn't feel genuine. And the reason I know this is because in my field, which is mentalism with a background in magic, we'll often see performers who start doing family shows with a lot of kids, and they develop this way of speaking with this dramatic thing with the big gestures and the pauses and the tonality going up and down. And then when they go to a crowd that's all adults, we see that it doesn't work. The audience doesn't connect with that style of communication, and they often get irritated. In fact, I bet that for a lot of you, not everyone, but a lot, when she said, "They're amazing," with that smile, it irritated you. You felt like it was over dramatic before I even said anything. Okay, then we have the little interruption choreography. So Meghan Markle is completing a thought, but before she can, the interviewer, Jane Pauley, cuts her off, and then she in turn gets cut off by Prince Harry. And there's a whole bunch of body language happening throughout this little back and forth. So Meghan Markle is completing a thought there. She's saying, "We're happy to be able to be part of, pause, change for good." And I don't know if that pause is one of her dramatic pauses that she often does in the way that she speaks, or if it's just a pause to think of the right words to say, change for good. It could be either one. But in that pause, before she says change for good, Jane jumps in. In that moment with the interruption, we see a lot of interesting stuff, both with Meghan Markle and with Prince Harry. So with Meghan, we see an eye block, so her eyes close, and we see this tight lip smile. She also speeds up that sentence to get it in there because she notices the interruption and finishes her thought.
And we're just happy to be able to be a part of
Well, you
change
hope
for good.
that when your children ask for help.
So there are two things this could be. The camera cuts away really quick. I would have liked an extra second, but there are two things it could be. The first possibility is that she got her sentence out and it's just a smile of like, and that's what I have to say about that. Because every now and then when she ends a thought, we see this kind of smile. But with that eye block, it's also possible that this is some irritation. Like she had this pause, she was going to finish her sentence, she got cut off. So it's this, very often with irritation, we see that eye block with this tight smile, often with an inhale as well. So this kind of thing, especially in a social interaction. You're talking to someone, something kind of just irritates you and you just go like that, We're not seeing a big dramatic moment, like there's no turning away, there's no real clench. But it kind of looks like it might be that. Prince Harry, on the other hand, at the moment of the interruption, turns from Meghan Markle towards the interviewer, and we see two things. The first is an eye flutter. That's when we blink very rapidly in succession. And the second is a lip lick, where the tongue comes out and licks the lips. Lip licking, when it's not part of someone's baseline, that's very important because some people normally in conversation lick their lips a lot. But when someone doesn't do that, and we see it, it's commonly associated to stress because with stress, the mouth dries out and we do this to correct that. It can also be a grooming gesture, right? When we're on camera, we're aware. Every now and then we take a second to make sure we look good. But it is either self-aware or stress. Eye fluttering is something that the research has shown is very consistent with processing memory or emotion. When we're retrieving memory or putting something in memory, or when we're dealing with an emotion to try to figure out how to deal with something. So in pre-confrontation, we often see someone just kind of processing their emotions, their feelings, and we see those flutters. It happens a lot. So it's possible that with that lip lick of stress and that flutter, Harry is kind of turning towards the interviewer like, oh no, did you just cut her off? Abort, don't do it. Because Meghan was kind of on this roll and she was talking about something that's important to her. And just before she could drive it home, she was cut off. So I think even Harry was like waiting to hear the end of it and was like, oh no, don't do that kind of thing. Which in turn would also explain his kind of abrupt interruption of the interviewer, because now the interviewer says, you know, as parents, you hope that when your kids need help, that someone's there to help. And Harry cuts in, and it's not just like a polite, you know, addition or something. We see him cut in with this hand clapping gesture. And think about this, in any conversation, when you're talking, someone goes, hey, like this clap, it's kind of like this really abrupt interruption. So we see this clapping in an abrupt way, and he goes, if they know how to help. And what's really interesting with this, if they know how to help, is right at the end of it, we see this nod as if they know how to help. And if you look at one side of the mouth, it's really subtle and hard to spot. I'll play it a few times, zoomed in, and then I'll slow it down. But we very quickly see the left side of his mouth kind of scrunch up like this for a quick sec with that final nod. In fact, if you really want to see it, don't focus on the mouth, focus more here on the side of the nose. Between the nose and the mouth, you're going to see that kind of line just very quickly and subtly go like this with that nod like that.
If you know how to help. How to help. How to help.
That looks a lot like the universal expression of contempt, which the research has shown looks the same everywhere in the world, and it's a scrunching on one side of the mouth. So sometimes it looks like this, and sometimes it looks like this. And sometimes it's very, very quick. But this is really, really small. It might be a small smirk of him going, if they know how to help. Like, so imagine if I did that with a smirk, right? If they know how to help. Like with a smile, I'm kind of elaborating on this point. It's important, but it can also be, because with that head forward, you know, that interruption, if they know how to help. Like it'd be a little bit of like, you know, got it? It's important for you to get this. So kind of a bit of that contempt or feeling morally superior in that moment. I do want to point out something that I saw numerous commenters and even articles talk about. And it's when Harry goes, if they know how to help, and you look at Meghan, she kind of has this side eye, and then she starts grooming her lips with this retracted lip thing. And then as he says, if they know how to help, she goes, with the eyebrow flash, like accentuating or agreeing with what he's saying. So some people said that it's just like side eye to Harry because he interrupted the interviewer. I don't think that's what it is. First of all, if you look at her eyesight, she's not turning entirely towards him. There isn't this kind of like abrupt looking at him. She's looking more in front of her and to her right. And it's likely that there's some producers there, or maybe even a monitor that she's checking while they're talking to make sure everything looks okay. That would also explain the grooming, right? Because we see her lips come in like this, which is something we often see when people fix themselves up to bring more color to the lips. So it makes a lot more sense to me in that moment that she looked over, and I don't know if it's a monitor, it could be, or maybe some producers, but in this moment where they're talking, she just takes a second to groom, and she agreed with him while she was grooming, so that's why she didn't get a, that's right, we got a, because it was in the middle of that grooming. Okay, now we're gonna move on and look at some more interesting body language, and one of the most confusing moments that I've seen in a very long time. But before we do me a huge favor, hit that subscribe button, turn those notifications on for more behavioral analysis and practical psychology content.
I think you have to start somewhere. I think the simplest thing that anyone watching this or anyone who's able to make change, to look at it through the lens of, what if it was my daughter? What if it was my son? My son or my daughter who comes home, who are joyful, who I love, and one day, right under my roof, our entire lives change because of something that was completely out of our control.
That's, I think, one of the scariest things that we've learned over the course of the last 15, 17 years that social media's been around, and more so recently, is the fact that it could happen to absolutely anybody. I mean, we always talk about, in the olden days, if your kids were under your roof, you knew what they were up to. At least they were safe, right? And now they can be in the next door room on a tablet or on a phone and can be going down these rabbit holes, and before you know it, within 24 hours, they could be taking their life. At this point, we've got to the stage where almost every parent needs to be a first responder. And even the best first responders in the world wouldn't be able to tell the signs of possible suicide. Like that is the terrifying piece of this.
Okay, so here we have yet another example of how sometimes people will feel Meghan Markle isn't being genuine, and it's just a result of the way she communicates. And we've looked at other instances like this before where she's talking about something really sad, really tragic, and throughout she has this smile on her face as she's talking about it. In this case, the conversation is about self-harm or taking one's life. And these are topics that, I personally would have a very hard time talking about these things with a smile on my face. Self-harm, and it's just so counterintuitive. But when she's talking about it and going, what if it was my daughter? What if it was my son? She has this smile throughout that whole thing, pretty much. And when they zoom out, we see to her left that there's a couple, and I'm going to go ahead and assume that this couple has lost a child. Because if you look at the man and you look at his face, that is exactly the universal expression of sadness. So we could see the corners of the mouth turned down. We see droopiness around the cheeks, around the eyes, and we see the center of the eyebrows coming up and close together. And he's in his bubble. They're talking, he's kind of looking off into the distance, and he's just kind of trying to keep it together. So there's this man who's been affected by this, and he's in her peripherals. She could see him, and she's there talking about, what if it's my son? What if it's my daughter? What if it's this? And and throughout the whole thing, she has this smile. And again, some people do this, right? They lighten the mood of something negative with this smile, especially on TV. It's the way they communicate, even if it's negative. But to a lot of people, it just feels off. Like, why are you smiling when you're talking about this heavy topic with this guy next to you who's obviously going through it? Now, in contrast to that, we get Prince Harry who speaks next. And you'll notice that with him, there is a more seriousness or maybe even a sympathy to his tone when he's talking. So now he occasionally smiles as he talks about happy things or happy memories, but I would say when he talks about tones, his facial expressions more accurately depict that tone. And this is a good example because here when he's talking about how, before all this technology, when you were in the same house with your kids, at least you had a certain sense of control. Now they could be in the next room, and his face goes to a very serious place. Right? And we even have a head tilt as he's talking about it. And head tilt is something we very commonly see in exchanges of sympathy. So if somebody says something that gets sympathy, I might go, oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. And they go, oh, it's fine, don't worry about it. So we have a lot of this head tilt with sympathy. We also get it with skepticism a lot, head tilt when you're curious about something or skeptical, but that involves a lot more scrunching on the face. So we're getting some sympathy here, some delicateness around the subject when Prince Harry is talking about it. That said, it's my logical / over-analytic brain that kicked in with what Harry said at the end, especially because I've worked in the field of depression prevention before, and there's a couple of things for me that didn't add up that I'm going to talk about in a second. But before I do, I want to preface it by saying I am 100% in support of this mission. Everything that they're talking about, anti-bullying, yeah, we could talk about the way certain things are being communicated and the body language and certain things that don't make sense, but this is absolutely a net good, and I am 100% for talking more about cyberbullying and helping causes that try to fight that. So here are a few little logical issues I had with what Prince Harry was saying. First, him using the word first responder. Now, I don't know if this is a new term that's being used in the industry of cyberbullying or self-harm. I'm not sure. But in all my years working with depression and self-harm and this kind of thing, first responder is not really a term that we would use for prevention. First responder usually happens after the emergency. So if somebody has done something, a tragedy has occurred, first responders are the one who respond first. So to me, what he's saying sounds more like intervention, the first to intervene, to see the signs and intervene, not respond. But that's just semantics. Maybe by response, he means like respond to the signs. Anyways, just confusing language, not a big deal.
At this point, we've got to the stage where almost every parent needs to be a first responder. And even the best first responders in the world wouldn't be able to tell the signs of possible suicide. Like that is the terrifying piece of this.
The next thing is the self-defeating argument, because he says two things that kind of undo each other. Because he's saying we're at a point where almost every parent has to be a first responder, then immediately says that even the best first responders in the world can't see the signs to prevent this kind of thing. So if the best in the world can't do it, why would every parent become the thing that is ineffective. I think this is again just an issue with him trying to communicate the point that he's trying to make, because I get the first part, like, that parents should have the knowledge to know what to look for. This sign might indicate, okay, you might have to have a conversation, and also they should have the knowledge on what to do. But then that second part of him saying even the best first responders in the world don't know how to see the signs, well, that's not necessarily true. Of course, nobody can always know instantly for sure, but there are certain things that you can see if something's going wrong. So I'm really sure why that second part was necessary. It kind of undid the first part. Very bizarre. And then the third thing that I noticed about what he says is, again, from my experience working in this space with different families and different people from different circumstances, where when he's saying that every parent should be a first responder, I'm not sure he realizes that that might be coming from a position of comfort, because they have the luxury of being around their kids very often. I know he takes meetings and he travels, but he's talked about how he tries to maximize the amount of time he spends with his kids, and Meghan Markle does as well. So they have that luxury of being able to be around the kids, whereas I've worked with families before where it's a one-parent household and they go from day shift to night shift, back to day shift, and they don't necessarily have that time or that luxury. But again, I just think it's a jumbled message. I think the message isn't coming through or being expressed right, because if the point that he's trying to make is, parents should have the resources, or we should educate caregivers, teachers, babysitters, all the family members, just create more awareness about how to spot these signs, how to deal with them. And then we don't need to talk about how, there's a lot of first responders out there who wouldn't even know what the signs are. We don't need to say that. Just create more awareness on the topic. I feel like at the core there's a great message here, but it just got jumbled in the delivery.
You had an experience that connects you to these families, and I see you touch your husband's hand in just the way I knew that you would be looking after each other if I went places. But the connection that you have with people is they know you had suffered too, personally. Contemplating killing yourself is what suicidal ideation was. And I'm dancing around this because I can see you're uncomfortable with my even going there. Do you?
I understand why you are, though. I wasn't expecting it, but I understand why you are, because there is a through line, I think. And when you've been through any level of pain or trauma, I believe part of our healing journey, certainly part of mine, is being able to be really open about it. And I haven't really scraped the surface on my experience, but I do think that I would never want someone else to feel that way. And I would never want someone else to be making those sort of plans, and I would never want someone else to not be believed. So if me voicing what I have overcome will save someone, or asks or encourage someone in their life to really genuinely check in on them and not assume that the appearance is good so everything's okay, then that's worth it. I'll take a hit for that.
Okay, what? I was obliterated by confusion at the beginning of that. I don't even know what's happening. So the interviewer says, so first she's bringing up the fact that Meghan Markle has some kind of connection to these families. And she says, I see you touch your husband's hand in just the way I knew you would be looking out for each other if I went places. So first of all, at least in what we saw, she wasn't touching his hand. So did she misspeak? Like, did she mean, touching his knee? Which is also confusing because, as we established earlier, she's been doing that the whole time. So it's not any topic that she brought up. She's making it seem like this topic that she brought up is making them comfort each other. But first of all, she didn't bring up the topic yet. She just ambiguously said something. And then second, she was touching his knee the whole time. So unless there was a hand touch there that we missed, that didn't happen, I don't really know. But I don't know what she's saying there. Then she says, you guys are looking out for each other if I went places. But what places? What are you talking about? But then she talks about it. Then she says what she's talking about. And she says it in a very direct, abrupt way, like using terminology that's like really on the nose, to the point where I had to bleep it because I'm not even sure if we're allowed to have stuff like that on YouTube. She flat out says it, like self-harm, but the actual thing, the actual act. She says that. Then she reiterates with suicidal ideations. So she says it first, Then she says it again. Then she says, and I'm dancing around this. No, you're not. You're bathing in it. You're drenched in it. What dancing around this? If this is dancing around it, what would saying it sound like? Because she literally said what she was talking about. So I have no clue what's happening here. I actually think what's going on is she's trying to fabricate this moment, right? Like there isn't anything here, but she's trying to build this dramatic, like, oh, I could see you guys comforting each other because this is a big important topic that I'm dancing around. Meanwhile, they're sitting the exact same way they were the entire time, and she's not dancing around anything. But immediately after that, she says, I can see you're uncomfortable. And there she might have something, because if we look at Meghan Markle, she is uncharacteristically still when this topic is broached, right? So she's sitting there and she kind of looks like a deer in headlights. She has her eyes fixated and open, and she's really not moving much at all. And I think she's just kind of taking a second to see, okay, where are we going with this? What is this topic? And then she says, I understand why you went there. I didn't know you were going to go there, but I understand why you went there. And in that moment, we see a few things. We see a flutter, so again, those rapid blinks. We see an eye block, which is something that we do when we're trying to keep a thought in or keep a thought out. But this suggests with that flutter, a lot of processing and just trying to formulate a thought. And we see a grooming gesture where she fixes her hair. And any gesture where we fix our appearance is our focus going inwards. And we're kind of getting ready to present something. So we're seeing quite a few things happen at the same time. Now, some people who want to see deception can look at those behaviors and say, oh, she's totally being deceptive. She knew they were going to talk about that. And others will say, no, it's just a stressful topic, so we're seeing signs of stress. The difficult thing here is that there really isn't any such thing as lie detection when it comes to body language, because there isn't anything all humans do when we're being deceptive. That's why we look for clusters of stress. And in an interrogation or interview, when we see those, we have to dig. We have to ask more questions to try to figure out, okay, what's really going on here, and look for more signs and more signs to uncover the truth. So in this case, unless I'm sitting in front of her and asking her, wait, did you know you guys were going to talk about that? So none of the producers told you this topic might be approached? And really digging into where we're seeing these things, nobody can just look at that body language and go, she's for sure being deceptive, or she's for sure being truthful, she's just stressed on the topic. Anyone who claims that they can use that to know for a fact if she's being deceptive or truthful in that moment doesn't know anything about behavioral analysis. There's no way. So I could tell you behaviorally there's an interesting cluster there. I could tell you I'm curious about it, but because a sudden stressful topic was introduced, there's no way to be able to know exactly why we're seeing those behaviors, and I really don't like when body language gets misrepresented. You'll also see a lot of people with certainty tell you, yeah, but all these interviews, they give you the questions ahead of time. Again, I can tell you from experience, I've done hundreds of interviews like this. I've consulted on a bunch as well, and it's really a coin flip. Sometimes they give you all the questions ahead of time. Sometimes they want it to be a little more casual or conversational, so they might tell you, these are the topics, but they won't give you the questions. And other times, they just say, we're going to sit down and chat, and you really don't know what you're going to talk about. So nobody with certainty, unless somebody was there and has more information on this, nobody with certainty could look at this and know exactly what's going on based on those behaviors. While she's talking, she talks about scratching the surface of her experience, and we see something really interesting just before my experience. As she's looking off in the distance, we see the inner corners of her eyebrows for a quick second coming together like this, upwards and close to each other, but just the inner corners. The rest of the eyebrows don't move. So just those inner corners come close together, then go back down. There is a ton of research on the universal emotions. These are emotions that are expressed more or less the same way everywhere in the world, cross-culturally, even in people who were born blind. And one of those emotions is sadness. And one of the things that we see with sadness, again, pretty much everywhere in the world, is that just the inner corners of the eyebrows come up and closer together like this. Now, the reason I have to hold the outer corners down is because it's really hard to fake for most people, especially when it's a quick flash like that. So some people can do it, and I know that a lot of people are trying right now, and some commenters will say, oh, I could totally do it. And even in those people who say I could do it, when I see it or when they show me, they're not doing it right, they just think they are, but it's those inner corners coming up like this without the rest of the brow moving. And again, it's really hard to hold it, but even harder to just really quickly flash it like that for a quick second. Even me, I have to use my fingers, and even at that, it's really not perfect. But I have seen pictures of myself or videos in a sad situation, and my eyebrows do that in those situations. Everyone's does, but it's hard to fake. And you might be thinking, oh, she's an actress, she has experience in acting, she can do it. It doesn't matter. Even most actors cannot fake that. Another thing we're seeing in this segment is actually the opposite of what we talked about a little bit earlier, especially in that moment where she's thinking on her own experience. You'll notice there isn't this big over-dramatized like, oh, it was so horrible. What I went through was so bad. Like there's none of that over-dramatization, right? We're seeing the quick flash of the eyebrows, and that smile that she uses when she talks about things isn't there the whole time. There's little bursts of it, but there's certainly a segment there when she's talking about this where she has a more serious tone and she's communicating this the way we would expect most conversations to go. And I think that if that's what a lot of this interview was, more people would connect with it, right? If it was just more of this kind of talking and, yeah, going through the emotions, but not purposely adding to them, I think a lot more people would look at it and go, okay, yeah, I can connect with this. At the end, she says that if what she went through and what she overcame, that's her word, can help others, then it's okay. She'll take that hit. And I don't want to invalidate anybody's experience out there. It's terrible that she went through this. I don't wish this upon anybody. And it's great that she's out there talking about it to help others deal with it. But I think that in the context of this interview, it might be a little unfair of her and this interviewer to compare her experience to what some of these parents who are present are going through. For one thing, she had thoughts, she had considerations, she went through something tough, but she, as she said, she overcame it. She came out the other end. These parents who are here lost their children, actually lost their children. So her experience doesn't really relate to that. The other difference I find is that we're talking about cyberbullying here, which she was affected by, and that these families were also affected by. But the difference for me, once again, is that these were teenagers who were being cyberbullied online when they never really looked for any type of attention or limelight. On the other hand, with Meghan Markle, not that I'm saying cyberbullying is ever merited, however, she went out there looking for fame, right? Her and Prince Harry went out and did some very controversial interviews with Oprah, that series on Netflix, and they certainly said a lot of controversial things about other people out there, so they kind of dished out the criticism as well, and they chose to be there. So cyberbullying is a side effect of that. Like, it's going to happen. You're going to get negative feedback anytime you do something public. So again, I'm not saying she shouldn't create awareness or talk about this. She absolutely should, but I think in this context, it's an unfair comparison when you're talking about these families who lost their teenage kids as a circumstance, who went online and were bullied when they really probably weren't looking for that kind of thing at all. And I think perhaps it's just a little unfair when this piece is about cyberbullying within families and the worst possible effects that these families suffered, to compare that to her experience, which is negative in its own right, but I think that's where a lot of viewers felt a bit of a disconnect. Like, when they're talking about this, why is the interviewer bringing Meghan's story into this? It doesn't quite relate.
Why would you do this? Why would you do this?
The simple answer is so others don't have to live what we've lived and will continue to live.
I don't expect anything from anyone. This is just a labor of love in honor of my son and all the other children that have lost their lives to fentanyl. This is for the mother who cannot get out of bed, for the dad that won't leave his house. I stand here for them too. I hope that one day when it's my turn to go home, I'll see my son and he'll tell me, "Good job, Mama."
All right, so I just wanted to play the clip of that lady because she's one of the parents who's there who lost her child, and she's talking about it. And I think pretty much anyone who heard her talk would emotionally have felt that and connected to that. And that's, I guess, really a great way to demonstrate what I was saying. In this topic, this is real, right? This is someone who lived this, who went through this. So in comparison, when we're hearing from, and I get it, you know, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, they have a big name, so they can bring more attention to the cause. And they absolutely should. They should champion the cause and bring attention to it and talk about it, create awareness. But as spokespeople, talking about their experience, you know, when you compare it to someone like this who actually experienced it, for me, there's a disconnect. But at the end of the day, I want to make it extremely clear that I do think this is a massive net positive, and they should be talking about this and creating this awareness. But as a behavioral analyst, it's my job to look at the facial expressions, the body language, the nonverbal communication, the verbal communication, to try to figure out what someone is thinking or feeling and what others are feeling and thinking when they watch this type of interview. So yeah, at the end of the day, there are parts of the message that are jumbled, things that look a little out of place. I can understand why people disconnect with it. I do feel like drawing on their own experience is disconnecting from the message because it doesn't quite apply to them the same way it applies to some of these other families. I can say all that, but at the end of the day, I absolutely think that the core message is extremely important and positive. So let me know in the comments what you think of all this, and more specifically, let me know, do you believe that if the message, if the mission is positive, does it matter? These little things in communication, this seems a little fake, that seems a little off, that seems a little jumbled. Does all that matter if the core is positive? Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you on the next one.